Hello, I welcome you all to the first lecture of week 2 of the NPTEL course on modernization and creative communication. Modernization and creative communication are intertwined, more intertwined than they initially appear. Modernization isn't just a shift in how societies function structurally, but a transformation of how people express themselves and connect with one another. Creative communication, whether through art, literature, music, or even architecture, is a mirror of these societal changes. Think about how the invention of the printing press in the 15th century revolutionized the spread of ideas. It democratized access to knowledge and laid the groundwork for the Enlightenment. Similarly, the advent of the Internet in the late 20th century brought about new forms of societal interaction and creative expressions, from blogs and memes to collaborative projects like Wikipedia. When we think about modernization, it is also important to remember its implications for identity and culture. A small example of this would be the Industrial Revolution, which not only introduced factories and urbanization, but also inspired a wave of creative output responding to this change. Writers like Charles Dickens captured the grim realities of industrial life, while romantic poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge retreated to nature, lamenting the loss of pastoral simplicity. Creative communication reflects the anxieties, aspirations, and contradictions of modernization. The lecture is about understanding how societies modernize, how modernism as an artistic movement critiques the process, and how the concept of modernity as a cultural and intellectual conditions informs both. To truly grasp essence of modernization, modernism and modernity, we need to examine their origins and trajectories in detail. Modernity as an intellectual and cultural phenomena revolves around the idea of living in the now. I repeat this: modernity as an intellectual and cultural phenomenon revolves around the idea of living in the now. It emphasizes progress, innovation, and a break from tradition. But it's not as straightforward as simply moving forward. Modernity is layered with contradictions. For example, while modernity brought us the marvels of technology, it also led us to existential questions about alienation, loss of tradition, and the commodification of human life. Modernism as an artistic and intellectual response to modernity emerged in the late 19th century, peaking in the early 20th century. It reflected the anxieties and dislocations caused by modernization, urbanization, technological advances, and the decline of religious authority. Thinkers like T.S. Eliot and James Joyce reimagined the form and content of art to reflect the fractured and chaotic modern experience. Modernization refers to the structural transformation societies undergo as they industrialize, urbanize, and secularize. It's a process that reshapes not just economies and institutions, but also the way people live, think, and interact. The rise of centralized states, mass education systems, and urban lifestyles are hallmarks of this transformation. But modernization is uneven. It doesn't happen uniformly across the globe or even within societies. For instance, while Western Europe industrialized rapidly, the global South experienced colonial modernity, where modernization was imposed through imperial structures, often creating significant social and economic disparities. The lecture is structured to cover these concepts in depth, starting with modernity, followed by modernism as a cultural critique, and then modernization as a structural phenomenon. Along the way, we will also discuss the tensions and critiques these ideas generate, as well as the lasting impacts on art, society, and individual identity. Modernity is one of those elusive yet foundational concepts that has shaped much of the way we think, live, and interact with the world. To define it is to capture the essence of an era and a mindset characterized by rupture, progress, and an engagement with the present as distinct from the past. While the term itself originates from the Latin modernus, meaning just now, its philosophical and cultural implications are far reaching. Modernity began to take shape during the Enlightenment period of the 17th and 18th centuries. This was an era when thinkers such as Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, and John Locke championed reason, science, and individual liberty over tradition, superstition, and divine authority. Kant's famous essay, What is Enlightenment?, encapsulated the spirit of modernity when he urged humanity to dare to know, to think for oneself, to break free from the constraints of dogma and authority. However, modernity did not emerge in isolation. It grew out of a specific historical context: the decline of feudalism, the rise of capitalism, the Reformation, and the scientific revolution. These seismic shifts redefined how people viewed the world. For example, Galileo's heliocentric theory not only appended medieval cosmology, but also symbolized a broader reorientation of thought from divine to human centered explanations. Modernity, therefore, represents a historical break with the past, a turn towards progress, and an openness to questioning inherited truths. Charles Baudelaire, the 19th century French poet and art critic, offers a more poetic take on modernity. For Baudelaire, Modernity was about capturing the transient, fleeting experiences of urban life. He introduced the term modernity in his essay, The Painter of Modern Life, describing it as the interplay between the ephemeral, the constantly changing, and the eternal, the enduring truths that underlie these changes. Baudelaire's vision of modernity was deeply tied to the emergence of modern cities like Paris, which under Baron Haussmann's urban renovations became symbols of industrial progress, consumer culture, and social dislocations. Walter Benjamin expanded Baudelaire's ideas in his study of 19th century Parisian arcades, viewing modernity as a phantasmagoria of capitalism. For Benjamin, the dazzling display of consumer goods in these arcades reflected the enchantment of commodity culture, a hallmark of modernity, but also its alienating effects. He saw modernity as a double edged sword. It liberates but also mystifies, promising progress while masking its cost. Habermas, a more contemporary thinker, framed modernity as a project rooted in the ideals of enlightenment. For Habermas, modernity is tied to the pursuit of reason, dialogue, and critique, a collective effort to make society more rational, just, and free. However, he also warned against the irrational forces within modernity, such as the rise of fascism, consumerism, and the instrumentalization of reason. Modernity is not just about living in the now, it's about experiencing time itself as something dynamic, fleeting, and open to change. It is an era defined by its break with the past, but also by its continual self questioning. To understand modernity, we need to delve into the core characteristics. These traits reveal its inner tensions and paradoxes, making it both a force for liberation and a source of alienation. Modernity is marked by its ephemerality and contingency, a constant state of flux. In the 19th century, the rapid industrialization of cities like Manchester, London, and New York epitomized the sense of impermanence. The advent of the railroad and telegraph compressed time and space, reshaping how people perceived the world. Suddenly, the pace of life accelerated. The individuals had to adapt to a world where change was the only constant. Think of how impressionist painters like Cremona captured this fleeting, transient quality of modern life in the works, from the sifting light on the water to the hustle and the bustle of urban streets. Another hallmark of modernity is its emphasis on progress and rationality. Rooted in Enlightenment ideals, modernity celebrates scientific and technological advancement as pathways to improving human life. The steam engine, the electric light bulb, and the telephone are all products of this belief in progress. However, this focus on reason also created a sharp break with tradition. Modernity often alienates itself from history, viewing the past as something to be overcome rather than embraced. This is evident in the works of Romantic poets like Wordsworth, who lamented the destruction of rural traditions and natural landscapes by industrialization. Modernity is also inherently paradoxical. While it promotes individual freedom and innovation, it also generates new forms of domination and alienation. For example, Karl Marx critiqued modernity's capitalist structures for reducing human labor to a commodity, alienating workers from the products of the labor. This alienation is poignantly captured in modernist literature such as Franz Kafka, The Metamorphosis, where the protagonist's dehumanization reflects the alienating effects of modernity. Modernity's self-critical tendencies are another defining feature. Thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Theodor Adorno engaged in profound critiques of modernity's rationality and progress. Nietzsche, for instance, questioned the Enlightenment reliance on reason, famously declaring that God is dead. For Nietzsche, modernity's secular rationality had eroded traditional moral frameworks, leaving humanity in a state of existential uncertainty. Adorno and Marx Horkheimer, in the Dialectic of Enlightenment, argued that modernity's instrumental reason, urged the use of reason as a tool for domination, had paved the way for atrocities like the Holocaust. Finally, Matai Kadenskyu's concept of dual modernities captures the tensions within modernity. He distinguishes between rational modernity, which focuses on science, industrialization, and technological progress, and aesthetic modernity, which critiques these developments through art, literature, and philosophy. Rational modernity is exemplified by the factories and railways of the Industrial Revolution, while aesthetic modernity finds its voice in the fragmented narratives of modernist writers like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. Cultural modernity represents the lived and the aesthetic dimensions of modernity, the ways in which individuals and communities experience and respond to the forces of change. Kadenskyu's framework of two modernities is particularly useful here. On the one hand, social modernity is rooted in industrial capitalism, democracy, and urbanization. On the other hand, aesthetic modernity critiques this rationalized, industrialized world, emphasizing subjective experience, alienation, and artistic experimentation. Social modernity transformed the material conditions of life. The rise of industrial capitalism brought with it new modes of production, consumption, and social organization. Urbanization was one of its most visible effects, with cities like Paris, London, and Chicago becoming bustling hubs of activity. The development of infrastructure, from railways to skyscrapers, reflected a belief in progress and human ingenuity. Yet these changes also disrupted traditional way of life, leading to dislocation and inequality. Cultural modernity, as an aesthetic response to these transformations, sought to capture and critique the modern experience. Consider Charles Baudelaire, whose poetry celebrates the beauty and the chaos of human life. In Les Fleurs du Mal, Baudelaire portrays the city as both seductive and sinister, a space where modernity's contradictions came to life. Similarly, the Impressionist painters, with their focus on fleeting moments and sifting light, reflect the ephemerality of modern urban existence. Nietzsche's critique of enlightenment rationality also resonates with cultural modernity. He saw modernity's emphasis on progress and morality as stifling, arguing that it suppressed the creative and the instinctual aspects of human life. His philosophy inspired modernist artists and writers to embrace experimentation and ambiguity, rejecting traditional forms and conventions. Cultural modernity also generated counter-modern movements such as Romanticism and religious fundamentalism. Romanticism, for instance, emerged as a reaction against the urbanization and rationalization of industrial modernity. Writers like William Blake and Samuel Taylor Coleridge celebrated nature, emotion, and imagination as antidotes to the alienation of modern life. Religious fundamentalism, meanwhile, rejected modernity's secularism, seeking to preserve traditional values in the face of industrial and scientific progress. Another key feature of cultural modernity is its embrace of paradox and fragmentation. This is evident in modernist literature, where traditional narratives give way to disjointed stream of consciousness techniques. For example, Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse, delves into the inner lives of its characters, capturing the fragmented and subjective nature of modern experience. Similarly, Kafka's surreal and absurdist stories reflect the alienation and disorientation of life in a bureaucratized, industrialized society. Cultural modernity, then, is thus both a reflection of and a progress and a response to the forces of modernization. It celebrates innovation and progress, but also critiques their cost, offering a space for creativity and self reflection in an increasingly rationalized world. What is counter modernity? Counter modernity can be understood as a set of responses, movements, or ideologies that arise in opposition to modernity's ideals, structures, and consequences. While modernity celebrates rationality, progress, and secularism, counter modernity often critiques these values, seeking to reclaim what modernity discards: tradition, spirituality, or communal identity. Counter modernity is not a simple rejection of modernity, but a complex reaction that sometimes adopts modern tools and methods to challenge modernity itself. A prominent form of counter modernity is religious fundamentalism. Take, for example, the Islamic movements of the late 20th and the early 21st centuries. These movements reject the secularism and individualism of modernity, advocating for a return to religious values and traditional social orders. However, paradoxically, they utilize modern technologies like television, social media, and digital platforms to spread their message. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 serves as a key historical example. Under Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, the revolution mobilized modern communication technologies to dismantle the secular, westernized Pahlavi regime while promoting a vision rooted in Islamic tradition. Similarly, nationalism often functions as a counter modern response to the alienation and dislocation brought about by modernization. Romantic nationalism, which emerged in 19th century Europe, sought to reconnect modern industrial societies with their mythical past and authentic roots. Consider the works of Johann Gottfried Herder, who emphasized the importance of folk culture and national identity in response to homogenizing forces of industrial modernity. In India, leaders like leaders like Mahatma Gandhi critiqued Western modernity and industrialization, advocating for a return to self reliance and rural simplicity. Yet, Gandhi also engaged with modern political structures using mass communication and civil disobedience to mobilize people. A more extreme example of counter modernity is reactionary modernism, a term coined by historian Jeffrey Herf to describe Germany's paradoxical embrace of modern technology while rejecting democratic ideals and Enlightenment rationality. The Nazis celebrated technological and industrial advancement, such as the Autobahn and the propaganda films directed by Leni Riefenstahl, while simultaneously idealizing a mythical Aryan past and attacking modernist art and literature as degenerate. Philosophically, counter-modernity reflects the tension within modernity itself. Thinkers like Nietzsche and Heidegger grappled with the alienation of modern life, critiquing modernity's focus on rationality, industrial progress, and secularism. Nietzsche's declaration of the death of God is a profound critique of how modernity displaces traditional sources of meaning, leaving individuals adrift in a world governed by mechanistic logic. Heidegger, in his essay, The Question Concerning Technology, explored how modernity's technological mindset reduces nature and even human beings to mere resources to be exploited, a condition he called enframing. Countermodernity also manifests in the arts. The Romantic movement, for instance, rejected the nationalism and industrialism of the Enlightenment. Poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge celebrated the beauty of nature, imagination, and emotion as antidotes of the alienation and fragmentation of modernity. Similarly, William Blake's work critiques the dark, satanic mills of industrial England, portraying modernization as a destructive force. Countermodern movements highlight the contradictions of modernity. They remind us that while modernity offers progress and innovation, it often does so at the cost of tradition, spirituality, and social cohesion. These tensions continue to shape our world as movements across the political and cultural spectrum challenge the assumptions of modernity. Modernism, in its essence, is the artistic and intellectual response to the uncertainties, upheavals, and dislocations of modernity. Emerging in the late 19th century and flourishing in the early 20th century, modernism sought to reflect and critique the fractured, chaotic nature of the modern world. It is both a rejection of tradition and an embrace of innovation characterized by its experimentation with form, structure, and perspective. The historical backdrop of modernism is crucial to understanding its emergence. The Industrial Revolution had transformed not only the physical landscape with factories, railroads, and urban centers, but also the rhythms of daily life. Cities became hubs of commerce and culture, but they also alienated individuals from the close knit communities of rural life. The rapid pace of technological change, coupled with scientific advancements like Darwin's theory of evolution, challenged traditional religions and moral frameworks. Add to this the devastation of World War I, which shattered the optimism of the 19th century, and you have the conditions that gave birth to modernism. Modernism was not a singular movement, but a diverse, dynamic field spanning literature, art, music, and architecture. In literatures, figures like T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, and Virginia Woolf revolutionized narrative techniques. Eliot's The Wasteland, for instance, is a fragmented, elusive poem that captures the spiritual and cultural dislocations of post war Europe. Joyce Ulysses uses a stream of consciousness to delve into the interior lives and of its characters, reflecting the influence of Sigmund Freud theories on the subconscious. In visual art, modernism found expression in movements like Cubism, Futurism, and Surrealism. Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque, through Cubism, deconstructed traditional perspective, presenting multiple viewpoints simultaneously. This was a radical departure from the realism of early art and reflected the fractured nature of modern experience. Similarly, surrealists like Salvador Dali, sought to explore the unconscious mind, drawing on Freud's psychoanalytic theories. Music, too, underwent a modernist revolution. Composers like Igor Stravinsky and Arnold Schoenberg rejected traditional tonal structures, embracing dissonance and atonality. Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, with its jarring rhythms and harmonies, caused a scandal at its premiere but has since been recognized as a groundbreaking work that captures the primal, chaotic energy of modernism. Modernism was deeply influenced by cultural shifts of its time, including secularization, the rise of individualism, and the fragmentation of shared traditions. It rejected the certainties of the past, embracing ambiguity and complexity. For example, Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, explores a single day in the life of his protagonist, weaving together her internal thoughts with the external chaos of post war London. This focus on subjectivity and interiority reflects modernism's commitment to capturing the fragmented nature of modern consciousness. Modernism, Modernism's innovations extended to architecture as well. Figures like Le Corbusier and Bauhaus school embraced minimalism and functionality, rejecting the ornate style of the past. Le Corbusier's famous dictum, "A house is a machine for living in," captures the modernist ethos of efficiency and rationality, though critics have noted the potential for dehumanization in such an approach. Ultimately, modernism is both a product of and a response to modernity. It reflects the anxieties and aspiration of an age grappling with profound change, offering new ways of seeing and understanding the world. Modernism is defined by its radical break with tradition, its embrace of experimentation, and its focus on the subjective, fragmented experience of modern life. To understand modernism fully, it's important to explore its key characteristics and the ways in which they manifest across different art forms. One of the modernism's defining features is its rejection of realism. Whereas 19th century novels by writers like Charles Dickens sought to depict life as it was, modernists argued that realism was inadequate for capturing the complexities of the modern world. Instead, modernist literature often embraces abstractions, symbolism, and fragmentation. For instance, James Joyce, in his Ulysses, abandons linear storytelling in favor of stream of consciousness, presenting the chaotic flow of thoughts and sensations experienced by its characters. This focus on fragmentation is central to modernism. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland is a collage of voices, images, and allusions, reflecting the fractured nature of modern existence. Similarly, in visual art, Cubism shatters traditional perspective, presenting multiple viewpoints at once. Picasso's Les Démolios d'Avignon, for example, deconstructs the human form into geometric shapes, challenging conventional notions of beauty and representations. Modernism also explores themes of alienation and dislocation. The rapid pace of modernization, urbanization, and industrialization, and the decline of traditional communities left many individuals feeling unmoved. This sense of alienation is vividly portrayed in Franz Kafka's The Trial, where the protagonist becomes entangled in an absurd impersonal bureaucracy that reflects the dehumanizing forces of modernity. Experimentation with form and structure is another hallmark of modernism. In poetry, Ezra Pound advocated for imagism, a movement that sought clarity and precision in language. His famous injunction to make it new encapsulates modernism's commitment to innovation. In visual art, satirists like Rene Magritte used dream-like imagery to challenge conventional reality, creating works that blur the boundaries between the real and the imaginary. Modernism also reflects the influence of psychoanalysis, particularly Freud's theories of the subconscious. This is evident in the stream of consciousness techniques used by writers like Woolf and Joyce, as well as in the dreamlike imagery of surrealist painters. Modernists sought to delve beneath the surface of reality, exploring the hidden depths of human experience. Culturally, modernism critiques the commodification of life under capitalism. Writers like Eliot and Pound lamented the erosion of spiritual and cultural values in an increasingly materialistic world. Modernist art often resists commodification by emphasizing difficulty, ambiguity, and intellectual engagement, challenging audiences to actively interpret and participate in the creative process. In sum, modernism is a multifaceted movement that reflects the complexities and contradictions of the modern age. Through its innovation in form, style, and content, it captures the dislocation, fragmentation, and alienation of modern life, offering new ways of seeing and understanding the world. Now, we will discuss modernism's challenges to tradition. Modernism's rebellion against tradition was profound. Victorian morality, with its rigid codes of behavior, was seen as stifling and outdated. Bourgeois norms and religious authority, once unquestioned pillars of society, came under attack. For modernist realism, the dominant mode of representation in 19th century art and literature was no longer sufficient to capture the complexities of the modern life. The innovations of modernisms were not just aesthetic, They were deeply philosophical. For instance, modernist writers like Marcel Proust, in The Search of Lost Time, rejected linear storytelling in the favor of exploring memory and subjective time. Now, this rejection of traditional narrative structures was echoed in poetry by T.S. Eliot, whose The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock combines modernist literature or themes of alienation and indecision with a fragmented free-form structure. In painting, artists like Pablo Picasso and George Braque revolutionized the art world with Cubism, a style that centered traditional perspective and representation. Their works reflect the fragmented experience of modernity, offering multiple viewpoints simultaneously. Similarly, the works of abstract artists like Wassily Kandinsky sought to convey emotional and spiritual truths rather than representational accuracy. Modernism's challenges extended to music as well. Arnold Schoenberg's development of atonal music rejected the harmonic conventions of classical composition, creating a radically new sonic landscape that mirrored the dissonances of modern life. Stravinsky, the rite of spring, with his unconventional rhythms and soaring melodies, caused a riot at its 1913 premiere, a treatment to the disruptive power of modernist innovation. While modernity and modernism are cultural and intellectual phenomena, modernization is more structural and institutional process. Modernization refers to the transformation societies undergo as they transit from agrarian to industrial economies. Now, these changes are driven by industrialization, urbanization, and secularization, but they also involve shift in the political, social, and the cultural systems. Modernization is not merely about technological progress, it's a bundle of interconnected processes. For instance, the rise of industrial capitalism in the 18th and 19th centuries was accompanied by the growth of centralized political systems, formal education, and urbanization. These changes altered not only how people worked, but also how they lived, thought, and related to one another. Consider the development of modern transposition and communication technologies, such as the railroad and the telegraph. These innovations shrank distances and accelerated the flows of goods, information, and people. At the same time, they disrupted traditional ways of life as rural communities were drawn into the orbit of urban centers. This was particularly evident during the Industrial Revolution, when cities like Manchester and Birmingham became hubs of industry, attracting workers from the countryside, but also creating overcrowded, unsanitary living conditions. Modernization also involves secularization, the decline of religious authority in favor of scientific and rational worldviews. This shift is reflected in political developments like the French Revolution, which sought to displace or replace religious institutions with secular ones, and in cultural trends like the rise of humanism, which emphasized the potential of individuals to shape their own destinies. Now, modernization is often hailed as a universal path to progress, yet its trajectory is far from even and equitable. While some regions and groups have benefited immensely from modernization, technological, economic, and social transformation, others have been left behind, marginalized, and actively harmed. Uneven modernization is not only a feature of global inequality, but also of internal disparities within nations, communities, and cultures. To understand uneven modernization, it is crucial to consider how it unfolded differently across the globe. In Western Europe and North America, modernization was largely driven by industrialization and Enlightenment ideals of science, rationality, and progress. However, for much of the global South, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, modernization often came through colonial domination. This imposed modernization was exploitative, designed to extract resources and labor for the benefit of colonial powers rather than to foster equitable development. In countries like Britain, France, and Germany, modernization during the 18th and 19th centuries was marked by the rapid expansion of industry, urbanization, and scientific discovery. Britain's Industrial Revolution, for example, introduced mechanized textile production, railways, and steam power, transforming the economy and society. Cities like Manchester grew into industrial hubs, symbols of progress and wealth. However, this modernization came at significant social cost. Urban slums emerged as a result of overcrowded housing, poor sanitation, and the exploitation of labor. Karl Marx's critiques of capitalism arose from observing these very conditions, where modernization concentrated wealth in the hands of industrialists while subjecting workers to harsh conditions. The progress of modernization in this context was deeply unequal, creating new hierarchies and alienations. Even within industrialized countries, modernization was uneven. Urban centers like London and Paris experienced rapid development, while rural areas lagged behind. For example, in Victorian England, rural agricultural communities remained largely untouched by the technological advances transforming cities. This rural urban divide became a recurring theme in 19th century literature, as seen in Thomas Hardy's novels like Tess of the Aubervilliers, which lament the erosion of traditional ways of life in the face of industrial modernization. In the colonized regions of Global South, modernization was imposed rather than organic. Colonial powers introduced railroads, factories, and bureaucratic systems, but these were designed to serve imperial interest, not local populations. For example, the British constructed an extensive railway network in India during the 19th century. While these railroads are often celebrated as symbols of modernization, their primary purpose was to transport raw materials like cotton and tea to ports for export to Britain. Local industries, such as India's traditional textile production, were deliberately suppressed to make way for British imports, creating widespread unemployment and poverty. The unevenness of colonial modernization is further evident in Africa. The Belgian exploitation of the Congo during the King Leopold II's rule offers a grim example. Under the guise of modernization, the Congo Free State was subjected to brutal extraction of rubber and ivory, with no corresponding investment in infrastructure or education for the local population. What modernization did, such as building of transport system, was intended solely to facilitate resource extraction. In Latin America, modernization was similarly tied to global capitalist systems. Countries like Brazil and Argentina underwent industrialization in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, but this was heavily dependent on foreign investment and focused on export oriented economies. As a result, wealth remained concentrated in urban elites, while rural areas suffered from poverty and underdevelopment. Modernization unevenness is not just historical, it persists in the contemporary world. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen rapid technological advancement and globalization, but these benefits are unevenly distributed. Consider the digital divide. In developed countries, internet access is almost universal, while in many parts of sub Saharan Africa and South Asia, millions still lack basic connectivity. This technological gap exacerbates inequalities, limiting access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities. The global disparities in modernization can also be seen in the contrasting experiences of urban and rural areas. In countries like China and India, modernization has transformed urban centers into global hubs of commerce and industry. Cities like Shanghai and Mumbai are symbols of economic growth with skyscrapers, high speed railways, and thriving tech sectors. However, rural areas in these countries often remain underdeveloped with limited access to electricity, clean water, and health care. For instance, despite India's success in building a world class IT industry, many villages still rely on subsistence agriculture and lack basic infrastructure. Modernization has also created environmental disparities. The industrialized nations of the West have historically been the primary contributors to climate change, yet its effects are disproportionately felt by poorer countries in the global south. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and resource scarcity caused by global warming often hit the least developed nations hardest, further deepening the unevenness of modernization. In addition to economic and technological disparities, modernization often brings significant social cost. One of the most visible is the alienation it creates as traditional ways of life are disrupted or destroyed. This alienation is a recurring theme in modernist literature, from James Joyce Ulysses, who explores the disorientation of urban life, to T.S. Eliot Wasteland, which depicts a fragmented, spiritually barren modern world. Modernization also erodes traditional communities and social bonds. In rural areas, the migration of young people to cities in search of work often leaves behind aging populations, weakening the fabric of traditional family and community life. In urban centers, modernization creates its own set of challenges: overcrowding, pollution, and the rise of impersonal bureaucrats. These tensions are captured in the films of Charlie Chaplin, particularly Modern Times, which critiques the dehumanizing effects of industrialization and mechanization. Another social cost of modernization is inequality. While modernization often brings economic growth, it rarely benefits everyone equally. Wealth tends to concentrate in urban centers and among elites, leaving rural population and marginalized groups behind. In the United States, for example, the economic boom of the post World War II period led to suburbanization and rise of the middle class, but also entrenched racial and economic inequalities. African American communities excluded from the benefits of modernization through discriminatory housing policies and unequal access to education experienced a very different trajectory. Uneven modernization is both a result of and a challenge to the ideals of modernity. Modernity's promise of progress, rationality, and equality is undermined by the disparities and contradictions of modernization. For some, modernization represents liberation, access to education, healthcare, and technology. For others, it represents alienation, inequality, and environmental degradation. The tension between these outcomes forces us to question whether modernization as it has been practiced, is truly sustainable or just. Can modernization even be evenly distributed, or will it always create winners and losers? As we face global challenges like climate change and rising inequality, these questions are more urgent than ever. The uneven nature of modernization reminds us that progress is not automatic. It requires deliberate choices about how resources are allocated, whose voices are heard, and what values guide our development. Without addressing these issues, modernization risks deepening the divides it seeks to bridge, leaving us with a world that is modern in name but profoundly unequal in practice. Modernity, modernism, and modernization, though distinct, are interconnected aspects of the same transformative process. To fully grasp the intersection between modernity, modernism, and modernization, let us start by imagining the modern era as a vast, turbulent river. Modernity represents the water itself, the state of flow, with its current of change, innovation, and progress. Modernism is like the eddies and the whirlpools. Artistic and intellectual reactions to this current, shaped by its force, but also critiquing its chaos. Modernization, on the other hand, represents the bank and dams, structural and institutional changes that guide the flow and determine how far reaching its impact will be. I'll repeat this portion once again. To fully grasp the intersection of modernity, modernism, and modernization, let's imagine the modern era as a vast, turbulent river. Modernity represents the water itself, the state of flow, with its current of change, innovation, and progress. Modernism is like the eddies and the whirlpools, artistic and intellectual reactions to this current, shaped by its force, but also critiquing its chaos. Modernization, on the other hand, represents the banks and dams, structural and institutional changes that guide the flow and determine how far reaching its impact will be. At the heart of this intersection is the experience of rapid transformation. Consider the industrialization of the late 18th and 19th centuries. It wasn't just about machines and factories, it also meant rethinking time, space, and human relationships. Workers were suddenly bound by the rigid schedules of factory life rather than the rhythms of nature. Cities grew at unprecedented rates, creating a new urban experience filled with both opportunity and alienation. This industrial modernity shaped modernist literature such as Dickens' Hard Times, where the harsh realities of factory life collide with a longing for human connection and imagination. Modernism, as a cultural response to modernity, didn't reflect these changes. It actively challenged them. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland captures the spiritual and the cultural dislocation of a world reeling from the mechanization and fragmentation brought about by modernization. Modernism often critiqued modernization, relentless push for progress, questioning whether technological and economic advancement truly equated to human flourishing. For example, Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, explores how modernization, particularly urbanization and industrialization, shapes individual identity and psychological well being, portraying a post war London that is both vibrant and alienating. Modernization also plays a key role in shaping modernity's global dimensions. In Western Europe and North America, modernization was often celebrated as a sign of progress. However, in colonized regions like India, modernization was imposed through colonial rule, creating hybrid forms of modernity that mixed traditional practices with Western technologies and institutions. Think of how the British introduced railways in India not to modernize Indian society for its own sake, but to extract resources more efficiently. Yet these railways became a symbol of Indian resistance and identity during the independence movement, illustrating how modernization can produce unintended consequences. The interplay between modernity and modernization is also evident in art and architecture. The Bauhaus movement, for instance, emerged as a response to modernization, combining functional design with aesthetic innovation. Its clean, geometric forms reflect a belief in the potential of modernization to improve life, while its embrace of minimalism critiques the excesses of industrial capitalism. Similarly, Le Corbusier urban planning projects like Chandigarh in India sought to apply modernization principles to efficiency and rationality to city design, though not without controversy regarding the impact on local cultures. Ultimately, the intersection of modernity, modernization, and modernism reveal a sad tension between progress and preservation. While modernization transforms society structures, modernity as a mindset grapples with the philosophical implication of the changes, and modernism channels this grappling into creative expressions. All three, however, are response to the same historical forces, making them inseparable in their influence and significance. Modernity and modernization, for all their promises of progress, are riddled with tensions and contradictions. These tensions arise because modernization is rarely neutral or even distributed. It disrupts traditions, creates inequalities, and often pits rationality against spirituality. Modernism, as an artistic and intellectual movement, became one of the most important voices critiquing these tensions. One major tension within modernization is the clash between progress and the preservation of tradition. For instance, during the Meiji Restoration in Japan, 1868 to 1912, the country rapidly industrialized and modernized, adopting Western technologies and political systems. While this modernization brought Japan global power and prestige, it also eroded many traditional practices, leading to debates about whether the cost of modernization was too high. Similarly, in contemporary context, we see tensions in developing nations where modernization often involves adopting Western models of governance, economy, and culture, raising questions about the loss of indigenous knowledge and practices. Rationality, a cornerstone of modernity, also becomes a source of critique. The Enlightenment emphasis on reason and rationality and scientific progress fueled modernization, but philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Theodor Adorno questioned whether this rationality always led to liberation. Nietzsche famously declared the death of God, critiquing how modernity's reliance on science and reason displaced spiritual and moral frameworks, leaving individuals adrift in existential uncertainty. Adorno and Horkheimer, in the Dialectic of Enlightenment, argued that modern rationality often devolves into domination, as seen in the rise of fascist regimes and the commodification of culture. Modernism amplified these critiques through art and literature. T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock reveals the alienation and paralysis of modern life, portraying a protagonist overwhelmed by the meaningless rituals of bourgeois society. Similarly, Franz Kafka, The Trial, critiques the dehumanizing effects of modern bureaucracies, where individuals are reduced to cogs in an opaque and unfeeling system. These works highlight how modernization promises of efficiency and progress often result in alienation and loss of individuality. Another tension lies in modernization, environmental and social cost. Industrial progress has brought incredible advancement, but at the expense of ecological balance. The industrial revolution's reliance on fossil fuels, for instance, set the stage for climate crisis we face today. Socially, modernization often exacerbates inequalities, as seen in the rapid urbanization of cities like Sao Paulo or Mumbai, where gleaming skyscrapers coexist with sprawling slums. This tension forces us to ask, can modernization truly be called progress if it leaves so many behind? Modernist critiques also tackled the commodification of culture. In the capitalist system that accompanied modernization, art and literature often became products to be bought and sold, losing their deeper spiritual or moral significance. Ezra Pound's call to make it new reflected modernism's attempt to resist this commodification by emphasizing innovation and artistic autonomy. Yet even modernism wasn't immune to commodification, as modernist works became status symbols for the elite, raising further questions about the role of art in a modern world. In sum, the tensions within modernization, progress versus tradition, rationality versus spirituality, environmental damage versus economic growth are deeply ingrained in the modern condition. Modernist thinkers and artists, by critiquing these tensions, help us reflect on the cost and contradictions of modernity. As we conclude, it is worth reflecting on the profound complexity of modernity, modernism, and modernization. These concepts are not just academic, they are lived experiences that continue to shape our world. Modernity, with its focus on progress and innovation offers immense potential for human flourishing, but also creates challenges that force us to confront questions of meaning, identity, and sustainability. Modernism, as we have seen, provides a lens through which to critique and understand the transformations of modernity. Whether it is Eliot's fragmented poetry, Pohl's exploration of consciousness, or Picasso's deconstruction of form, modernism challenges us to see the world in a new and often unsettling ways. It reminds us that progress is not always linear and that the chaos and alienation of modern life require creative responses. Modernization, meanwhile, is the engine driving these changes. It reshapes economies, societies, and cultures, bringing both opportunities and inequalities. From the industrialization of Europe to the digital revolutions of today, modernization continues to transform how we live, work, and connect. Yet, it also raises pressing questions about sustainability. Are the environmental costs of modernization, climate change, resource depletion, loss of biodiversity too great? Can we create forms of modernization that are equitable, inclusive, and ecologically responsible? The intersections of modernity, modernism, and modernization also challenge us to think globally. In the 21st century, modernization is no longer the domain of Western nations. Countries like China, India, and Brazil are rapidly modernizing, often on their own terms, creating new hybrid forms of modernity that blend global influences with local traditions. At the same time, these processes are shaped by the legacies of colonialism, global capitalism, and environmental crisis, reminding us that modernity is always contested and never complete. Finally, we must ask, what does the future hold for modernity? Is it sustainable in long term? Can the critiques of modernism, with its emphasis on innovation and self reflection, help guide us toward a better path? The answers are not easy, but they are crucial as we navigate the complexities of rapidly changing world. Modernity, in its essence, is both a promise and a challenge. It promises progress, innovation, and liberation, but it also challenges us to rethink our assumptions and confront its unintended consequences. As we move forward, the lessons of modernism and the processes of modernization offer valuable tools for shaping a more equitable and sustainable future. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope the reflections inspire you to continue exploring the fascinating and ever evolving world of modernity.